Trevor James never forgot the woman with the ponytail and the burns on her arms. The memory lived inside him like a quiet echo, reverberating through the years with the same intensity as the moment she had pulled him from the fire. As a child, it showed itself in drawings, sketches scribbled into margins of school notebooks, the woman's silhouette framed by smoke and flame. She was always faceless, but always real. There was no question in his mind that she existed, no doubt in the stories he quietly carried. She had entered the burning motel barefoot, carried him out bleeding and coughing, and vanished like smoke into the night. The fire had taken more than just the motel. Trevor's parents had died only weeks earlier in a car crash on the icy stretch of Route 8. He had been placed under temporary guardianship, a distant relative, well-meaning but overwhelmed, when the motel caught fire. That night had fractured what little stability he had left. He stopped speaking for nearly a year, communicating only through gestures and brief, disjointed sentences. But he drew. Every day. The woman was always the same. A ponytail. Long sleeves in every image, even when it didn't make sense. A hand-woven bracelet, half unraveling, hanging from her wrist. It was that bracelet, more than anything else, that tethered the memory in place. When the fire department pulled him clear of the wreckage, it had been clutched in his small, soot-covered hand. They tried to find her. Officials asked around. The local paper ran a piece, motel fire mystery, child rescued by unknown woman, but there were no leads. No name. No witness who could say who she was or where she went. The story faded. But Trevor never stopped remembering. He kept the bracelet in a small wooden box lined with blue velvet, the kind usually meant for jewelry or medals. It traveled with him from foster home to foster home, and eventually to the house of Ed and Marlene Strathmore, a retired couple who had taken him in when he was 9. They didn't have children of their own, and they didn't ask many questions. What they offered instead was something Trevor hadn't known since the fire: silence that wasn't empty. Meals that came without expectation. A room of his own, with walls he could cover in diagrams, posters, and, eventually, certificates. What Trevor discovered, slowly and then all at once, was that the world was full of danger most people didn't see. Fire alarms that failed under heat stress. Detectors with dead batteries and low-income housing. Evacuation plans that didn't account for children or the elderly. It all felt personal. Not because he feared fire, but because he had survived it, because someone had risked their life to make sure he did. And because most people never got that chance. In high school, he took apart smoke detectors and rebuilt them stronger. By college, he was designing temperature-sensitive alert systems that used AI algorithms to track building conditions and identify early signs of combustion. He worked quietly, never comfortable with praise. But the bracelet stayed in his desk drawer, even in his lab, as if watching over him. His breakthrough came at 24, with a prototype that could detect a fire 15 seconds faster than any commercial system on the market. That window, just 15 seconds, could mean the difference between life and death. He knew. Government agencies took notice. Contracts came. His company grew. Still, he avoided the spotlight. When invited to speak at conferences or receive awards, he would send his chief engineer. He wanted no stage, no applause. He was building something. That was enough. But as the 20th anniversary of the fire approached, something in Trevor stirred. He found himself staring at the bracelet more often, turning it over in his hands, noticing the way the threads had frayed just slightly over the years. He thought about what she might look like now. Would she have the same burns on her arms? Did she remember the fire the way he did, or had it been just another choice in a life full of quiet sacrifices? The questions kept him awake. And so, one morning in March 2023, Trevor stood on the cracked sidewalk outside a rusting car wash in Riverdale, Colorado. The building sagged slightly at the corners, its paint peeling in long strips. Next door, an empty lot overgrown with weeds. But he saw something else. A beginning. He bought both properties outright. No negotiations. No press release. He contacted a local architecture firm with instructions to draw plans for a 2-story fire prevention training center. There would be classrooms, dormitories, and a memorial space. And scholarships, full funding for young people from difficult backgrounds who wanted to become first responders. He insisted on a low, durable plaque outside the entrance. Nothing flashy. Just a simple inscription, in honor of those who act, not for praise, but because it is right. Only his closest team knew what it meant. Then, quietly, Trevor began to search. He hired a private investigator to dig through hospital records, police reports, eyewitness statements. He requested footage from surveillance cameras at businesses near the motel from 2 decades earlier. Most of it had been lost or corrupted. But one clip survived, blurry and grainy, from a gas station across the street. There she was. A woman, mid-30s, long hair pulled back, carrying a child wrapped in a smoke-blackened towel. She was barefoot. Blood soaked through the sleeve of her jacket. In the moment just before the clip ended, something fell from her wrist. Trevor paused the video again and again, zooming in. The bracelet. He played the clip 100 times. And then, at last, he made it public. Trevor stepped onto a small stage beside the car wash and announced the coming center to a crowd of local journalists and curious residents. He held up the bracelet. He shared the footage. He told the story he had kept inside for 20 years, the woman who saved him, who walked into fire and left before anyone could say thank you. He asked for help finding her. Within hours, news outlets picked it up. The unknown angel of Riverdale began trending online. Veterans groups, fire departments, and local communities across the country shared the footage. Trevor didn't want celebrity. He wanted one thing, to bring the story full circle. Because the center would be built with or without her. But he knew, it wasn't finished unless she knew what she had done. That it mattered. That it had grown. That someone came back. The search spread like ripples in still water, slow at first, then reaching places no one had expected. News outlets ran the story under headlines that captured hearts across the country: boy saved from fire seeks guardian angel after 20 years, the bracelet in the ashes, and help us find Riverdale's unknown hero. Footage from the original motel blaze resurfaced. The grainy clip of a barefoot woman, soot-streaked and bleeding, carrying a boy from a second-story window played on loop. Her face was hard to see. But the bracelet, hand-woven, half-unraveled, was unmistakable. People began to speculate. Was she a nurse? A firefighter? A mother who lost her own child and couldn't bear to watch another die? The bracelet became a symbol. Woven replicas popped up online, on Etsy, on fundraiser sites, and social media campaigns. Schools created kindness challenges using the tag hashtag #BeTheBracelet. A girl in Michigan wove bracelets for her entire class and asked them each to perform one selfless act. A fire department in Iowa added a bracelet replica to their wall of honors. But in Riverdale, the search remained grounded. Trevor had hoped someone in town would recognize the woman. He set up a small kiosk outside the construction site with blown-up stills from the footage and a notebook for tips. Names were scribbled down. A few seemed promising. A retired nurse. A middle school teacher. A church volunteer. Trevor followed each lead personally, hopeful, then quietly disappointed. And yet, someone was watching. Each evening after her shift at the car wash, Carla waits past the kiosk. She never stopped. Never leaned in for a closer look. But her eyes lingered, just for a breath, on the image of the bracelet. She recognized the towel she had wrapped around her arm that night, the way the child's small body clung to her in the footage, limp and smoke-darkened. It had been 20 years, but the memory was intact. She had been driving home, exhausted from the overnight shift at a warehouse job. Snow on the shoulder. Dim motel lights. Then the flicker of flames through the trees. The call to 911 had been instinctual. But when she saw the child's silhouette at the window, instinct gave way to something deeper, some wordless demand from her body to act, despite the fear, despite the pain. She didn't want to be a hero. She just wanted to save a life. And when it was done, when the boy had been taken by the paramedics and the motel collapsed into smoking debris, Carla had walked away. She didn't give a name. She had slipped unnoticed into the darkness, back to her son, her small apartment, her quiet life. She never mentioned the fire. Not once. Not even when her burns blistered through the winter or when she lost job after job because of the visible scarring. She wore long sleeves. Changed bandages alone. Taught herself how to endure. Now, seeing the footage felt like looking into a mirror she had boarded shut. She wasn't ashamed of what she had done, but she didn't want the world peering into her pain. Her good deed was never meant to be public. Recognition felt like exposure. But then came the renaming. One morning, a new sign was hoisted above the steel skeleton of the future center, the Unknown Angel Fire Training Facility. Carla stood across the street, holding a thermos of coffee that had gone cold. She knew the lettering was meant to honor someone nameless, someone selfless, but to see it in ink, on a banner fluttering above the street where she had walked for years unnoticed, felt like being called out by the sky itself. She could no longer pretend it wasn't about her. What tipped the balance wasn't the banner, or even the footage. It was a conversation overheard inside the car wash. "Did you hear they're naming that building for some mystery woman?" one of the younger workers said, shaking his head as he polished a hood. "Kind of silly. Could be anybody. People just want a story." Another added, "If she really did it, why not come forward? Probably a hoax." Carla said nothing. Just kept spraying foam across the windshield. But her hands tightened around the hose. Her heart beat just a little faster. Not from anger, but from the ache of being invisible even in the telling of your own truth. That night, she didn't sleep. In the morning, she didn't go to work. Instead, she walked to the construction site, her arms bare for the first time in years. The security guard at the gate noticed her immediately. His eyes flicked from her forearms to the poster of the woman from the footage. The burns matched. The build. The bracelet. Even the way she stood, half-turned, uncertain, felt familiar. He radioed someone. Within minutes, Trevor arrived. He didn't rush. Didn't speak. Just approached slowly, eyes wide, as if afraid a single word might undo the moment. Carla looked at him once, then down at the bracelet in the glass case beside the fence. Her own wrist now bore a faint scar where it once hung. Trevor lifted the box gently. Opened it. Inside, the bracelet lay beside a folded letter he had written the week before, unsure if it would ever be read. Carla didn't need to read it. She knew what it said. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But they stood there for a long time, surrounded by half-finished beams and the sound of drills in the distance. Recognition didn't need fanfare. For the first time in decades, Carla felt known, not as a face on a screen, but as someone who had mattered. She declined all interviews. Said no to the local news, to the evening segment, to the well-meaning neighbors who suddenly saw her in a different light. But she said yes to something else. When Trevor asked if she would help teach at the center, basic fire response, rescue theory, staying calm under pressure, Carla agreed. She wasn't a speaker. But she could show people what courage looked like when no one was watching. And that, Trevor believed, was worth more than any article ever written. Carla arrived for her first day at the center before sunrise. The building was still fresh with the scent of sawdust and new paint. The halls echoed her footsteps, each one steady, certain. She wore her old steel-toed boots, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder, and a short-sleeved polo embroidered with the center's logo, a quiet symbol of what had grown from a single act of courage. She didn't need a title. Her presence said enough. The training rooms had been designed for realism, mock doorways, weighted mannequins, smoke machines calibrated to mimic real fires. Carla moved through them with a calm intensity. She knew what panic looked like, smelled like. She had felt the heat clawing at her back, had pushed forward anyway. Now, she would teach others how to do the same, without the glamour, without the glory, just the work that needed doing. The first group she trained was a mix of teens and young adults, many from difficult homes, some one misstep away from court-mandated programs. They arrived with wary eyes, slouched postures, and an unspoken resistance to authority. But Carla didn't lecture. She demonstrated. She showed them how to wrap a burn with limited supplies. How to stabilize a beam with nothing but a broomstick and intuition. How to navigate a smoke-filled room when your body screamed to turn back. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority came from the space she held between fear and action, a space they felt the moment she entered the room. One student, a 17-year-old named Malik who rarely spoke, stayed behind after class one day. He pointed to the faint lines running up her arms, hesitated, then asked, "Was it real?" Carla didn't answer with words. She simply unwrapped a cloth she kept in her bag, the same towel she'd used the night of the fire. Burnt at the edge, frayed, still carrying the faint scent of smoke no washing could remove. Malik stared at it, then nodded, not needing anything more. That was how the students came to trust her. Not through stories, but through the quiet gravity of someone who had already walked through the fire. Word spread quickly. Not just among the students, but in the town. The woman who worked at the car wash was now training the next generation of first responders. The same woman who, years ago, had pulled a boy from a burning building and vanished. At first, the shift was subtle. The cashier at the grocery store offered her a ride home when it rained. Her landlord fixed the cracked step outside her apartment without being asked. The library extended her borrowing period without penalty. Then came the plaque. It was unveiled in a small ceremony a few months after the center opened. Carla hadn't wanted it. She even tried to leave before the event, but Trevor gently insisted. "It's not for you," he said. "It's for them, to remember what they can be." So she stayed. Beneath the main staircase, in a glass case lined with velvet, sat the cotton bracelet. Next to it was a photo, restored from the surveillance footage, of Carla carrying Trevor through the broken window. Beside that, a black and white portrait of her uncle in his firefighting gear, the same one that hung in her living room for years. The plaque below read, "Courage is not a title. It is a choice. In honor of those who act when no one is watching." Those who had once whispered now stood in silence. Among the small crowd were people who had walked past her at the car wash without a second glance. Who had dismissed her as someone broken. Who now saw what she had always carried quietly, without asking for acknowledgement. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. As if silence, in that moment, said more than any applause. In the months that followed, Carla's life didn't change in the way people often expect. She didn't move into a bigger home. She didn't buy a new car. She still walked to the center every morning, her thermos in one hand and her bag in the other. But something had shifted. She no longer wore long sleeves. Her scars, once hidden, became part of her uniform. Not as a symbol of pain, but of passage, through fear, through anonymity, into purpose. The students began leaving handmade gifts on her desk, drawings, notes, small tokens of gratitude. One day, a group of children she had taught in a basic safety class presented her with a bracelet, woven from red, black, and gold threads. They had read about the original in a news article. They wanted her to have a new one. She wore it every day. 1 year later, the center held its first anniversary gathering. Alumni returned. Some were already enrolled in emergency training programs across the state. Others had joined local fire departments. All of them pointed to Carla as the reason they believed they could. Trevor stood quietly in the back, observing. He had always seen himself as a builder, of tools, of systems, of futures. But watching Carla move through the room, offering a hand on a shoulder, a nod of encouragement, he understood what it truly meant to build something lasting. She wasn't just the heart of the center. She was its compass. And when a reporter, there to cover the anniversary, finally caught up with her and asked if it felt strange to be known after all these years, Carla had only one reply. "It's not a burden anymore," she said. "Because now, I'm not carrying it alone." That night, the town square lit up with lanterns. Children released them skyward in memory of all those who had acted without reward. Carla watched from the steps of the center, the bracelet glinting faintly in the light, her hands folded quietly in her lap. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every student who walked through those doors. To every child who wore a bracelet in tribute. To every person who had once walked past someone like her without seeing them. Because now, they saw. 1 year turned into 2. Carla's presence at the center became as steady as the sun rising over Riverdale's rooftops. Her quiet instruction, her unshakable calm, shaped not just students but an entire community. The fire drills at local schools were no longer rushed formalities, they were lessons etched with purpose. Families installed proper alarms. Neighbors checked in on each other. Slowly, gently, the town began to change. And it all traced back to one moment of courage, one night when a woman decided that saving a life was more important than staying safe. Trevor continued to expand the center's reach. A mobile training unit now traveled to rural counties, carrying Carla's teachings with it. At every stop, children asked about the bracelet. Some wore their own. Teachers spoke of bravery not as something loud, but as something steady, like walking into smoke when everyone else is running away. Carla never grew used to recognition, but she accepted it with grace. She gave talks when asked, always brief, always focused on the message, not the memory. Not everyone gets thanked for doing the right thing. Carla never asked to be found. She didn't rescue Trevor for a reward or for remembrance. She did it because someone was in danger, and she knew she could help. That was enough. But sometimes, someone comes back. Not with medals, but with meaning. Not with parades, but with purpose. And when they do, the world remembers that quiet acts of bravery, done without audience or applause, can echo louder than any speech. Because kindness without question is enough.